Hey, everybody, welcome and thanks for joining us today. I want to thank Tamar and everyone at LCDQ for partnering with us on what we're anticipating is a great event today. We're very excited also to welcome Margaret Russell and Michael S. Margaret, what a cast of characters, the two of you. Where to begin? Margaret, the former editor of Architectural Digest, VP editor-in-chief of Elle Decor, 3 best-selling books, which if you don't watch out, our marketing team will be contacting you for book signings. Emeritus trustee at the Kennedy Center, trustee of God's Love We Deliver, which I'm sure you're extremely proud of, design advisory team for the Obama Presidential Center, advisory council for the Philip Johnson Glass House, which is really interesting. I have a picture, a photograph of this house in my office that I always look at for inspiration. Michael is one of the most original and respected talents in the industry. He also is the designer of one of my favorite lighting fixtures in our collections. Michael has an international profile of residential, hospitality, and commercial clients. Michael believes everyone should live with things they love. I think we all can agree to that. Michael and Margaret will be discussing Michael's new book, Designing History, the Extraordinary Art and Style of the Obama White House. And as usual, the first 50 registrants and attendees to this discussion will be gifted a copy of the book by Circle Lighting. So we are going to try and get to questions at the end of the discussion. So please just enter your questions through Facebook Live. And now stand by for Margaret and Michael. So thanks everybody and enjoy.
Thank you, Gail. You have been such a leader in the design community, and I appreciate your supporting Michael's book in this way, and also for partnering with LCDQ. Tamar Michigan has been terrific in organizing this, and I'm thrilled to be a part of LCDQ again. You know, I helped launch the event in 2009 when I was the editor of Elle Decor, and actually over the years, Michael and I have co-hosted lots of Legends events. And so I'm happy to be talking with you, Michael, now about this book, which is great meaning to both of us, such great meaning. Let's see, let's get started. Michael, you're here with the president, walking down the colonnade, which the former president, which leads from the residence to the Oval Office. Can you bring us back to the beginning, like back in November 2008, of all the designers in America? Why you? How did this come to be? How did this happen?
Well, that's such a good question. I mean, I was just the most talented, so that was immediately no. First I want to. I know. No, first I want to thank Gail for the introduction. I was just in the Circa Lighting shop in New York about 2 weeks ago, and it's amazing how much product, and I mean, I just ordered some floor lamps for myself, and I just started. I mean, the depth of the collection of the things that are happening there is always so exciting, and just the quality is so amazing. It's always it's one of the it's like going in there, it was really sort of filled all these needs we had, and it's clearly at a price that is kind of science fiction to me always, but just it's really extraordinary what you guys have all been able to achieve. And I want to thank you for that and for the introduction. I just want to say, you said my book. Honestly, it's Margaret and I's book. I mean, Margaret worked on this so tirelessly. And if she's single for the rest of her life, it's because of me, because her most valuable dating years were spent in a stack of White House books, pouring through them
That's an awful thing to say. Stop that. Can we please go back? I'm back in November 2008 when there was lots of gossip. Everyone was calling me saying, who do you think is going to be, who's going to redecorate the White House? So
why me? Okay. Well, why me? I mean, clearly I was kidding. The situation is that I was really crazily lucky, and then I had a friend who, someone called Catherine Malkin, who lived in the same building as the newly appointed social secretary to the White House, a dear friend of mine now called Desiree Rogers, who is one of the most, was and is still one of the most glamorous women in Chicago, and was a real conduit to the Obamas in terms of what the White House would be, how the sort of social entertaining aspect of the White House would really sort of fall into place, and what would become a part of the real DNA and culture of an Obama White House. And Catherine Wade, and listen, I'm gonna give your books to Desiree. And I was like, sure, whatever. I had no expectation. And then in that, what Margaret and I sort of well documented in the book, it talks about this letter she wrote, which I only read when you started to gather the information and stuff from all these parties to put together for the book. There was this sort of glowing testament to me, which it's kind of great that I didn't see it until now, because it kind of made me want to lay down. It was so overwhelmingly positive. And I think that the real situation was that I think that they were looking for somebody who could do it. I mean, literally, it sounds simple, but who had the capacity, the office, the ability to be discreet, the ability to draw on sort of professional relationships, and to, who had some bulk, some gravitas, who could kind of do this. And so I was overwhelmed by the prospect of it, but I also sort of, like all important decisions in my life or things that are stressful, I kind of floated above my body until I could kind of inhabit it again and try to stay calm. And this began this extraordinary journey, which continues now. So it was a kind of like getting hit by lightning in a good way.
Well, I remember the time, because even though you weren't supposed to tell anybody, I was aware of what you were doing, and I was sort of amazed that you flew to Chicago, you were interviewed. The Obamas are really private people. I know when I was doing the photo research for the book, like, there were so few pictures of what their house in Chicago looked like. They're private about their family. How did you prep for that meeting? Like, what did you take when you flew out there? I would have been terrified. How did that meeting go? I know it was friendly, and Mrs. Obama hugged you, and you had a great chat.
Oh, it was amazing.
What did you bring? Did you bring a presentation?
I didn't really bring a presentation. I think I brought some samples of fabric that were, my first exchange ever. And it was like a forwarded email from Mrs. Obama. And it was like that the girls' rooms should be.
You were just saying about going to Chicago, but you know what? We've got a lot to see in Chicago. Is the past. So let's talk about the logistics of Election Day 2008 was November 4th. There were like fewer than 80 days until Inauguration Day.
Right.
You didn't really you sort of got the gig the beginning of December, because Thanksgiving was a late Thanksgiving. What happened? I actually have this, which I know was a godsend. Tell us sort of how the White House, what the transition was for helping you and the Obama family prepare for the move.
So, no, I think for the Obamas, it was, for Mrs. Obama and a few members of her senior staff, I think it was great. They'd gone through the house, and seen the children's bedrooms and kind of understood what what it was really going to be like to live in the house. For me, having been in the downstairs of the building, but not ever being upstairs, it was a kind of different experience. And I think that I had to sort of use what you see in front of you, photographs, this website, whitehousemuseum.org, that I discovered that was sort of an independent thing. There's a picture from it that became a huge source, because even though I had these sort of glamour shots of various rooms, it was very difficult to imagine what the rooms look like in 3D. And looking at old historic photographs on this site, I could kind of see the room from a variety of angles, and therefore kind of in my head understand a little bit more of the physicality. The one thing that I never, ever prepared for or understood was how tall these rooms were proportionate to like their dimension, which was kind of shocking when I first went into space. But so I had a great map basically, but I didn't have a run through. So I think that I had to kind of come up with solutions and ways in which to make the house, sort of as impactful as possible on day one.
And tell us about the warehouse, or what's available to you in terms of the White House before. I know you always laugh when we talk about the warehouse.
I always laugh about it because I had this vision that the warehouse, which is essentially a kind of in a secret location, they really take this thing very seriously, and has, post Mrs. Kennedy, nothing is really sold off from the White House ever. So everything, no matter how insignificant, a chair, a lamp, whatever is, goes into storage as a kind of kind of example or a piece or a sort of historical object. So the really good things are in the White House. There's a few things there, but there's a lot of sofas and stuff from old administrations. I mean, it's lots of rolled up rugs, things like that, but nothing really, no kind of jewel, no, kind of John Singer Sargent painting leaning against the wall. I was sadly disappointed in what was in there. But yeah, I could borrow some of that stuff. That really wasn't what I did on the first day. Really what I did was the Bushes had left the house in such incredibly good shape. It was completely movable, innable on move-in day. They'd really left it in beautiful move-in ready shape, and the rooms were put together in a very tasteful way. So what I really tried to do is bring contemporary art in. It was the one thing I could do that was fast, that had very little financial impact, because we were borrowing from national institutions like the National Gallery and the Hirshhorn. And immediately I could change the feeling and the vibe of the rooms and make them younger and more kind of charismatic. There you see a painting from the National Gallery by Ed Ruscha, being hung up on move-in day. That I could do. And then I had some other stuff. I brought kids sheeting that you helped me get through Anthropologie and a few other sources. I brought a new bed in that I had purchased, that I lent to the Obamas, a kind of maple bed you see here, it made up on move-in day. Things, I just thought it was weird and kind of slightly sort of, I don't know, it just didn't feel kind of like the correct thing to have the bed of the former president, no matter who they were, slept in, a day later by the new incoming president. It felt a little weird. So it was something I felt that was really symbolic and kind of significant, that they would start a new administration in a new bed for them. So those were things that we did. And I brought in some lamps you see here. I brought flowers in. I moved some art around. There you see this beautiful painting by James McNeill Whistler that belonged to the permanent collection of the White House, put next to the president's side of the bed, which when I saw him later that night in his evening attire coming back from the balls, he said to me, "There's a Whistler next to my bed." He was clearly kind of aware, and it had real significance to him that's the situation. His bedroom was in the White House the very first night he slept there. So we were really happy with that. And then the rest of the renovations and the redecorating spaces stuff came after this.
So post to the first night, for the first few weeks, it's basically you had sort of brought in some personal things, but it was really living with, because the Bushes had left it in such beautiful condition. I mean, this is their wall covering, their curtains, their bed skirt, but fresh linens, flowers. It was more finishing touches, and then moving all their personal stuff in and stocking towels and things. And basically, I remember you telling me that almost everybody who works in the White House pitches in, except for the kitchen staff. Like people move, because nobody is allowed to touch it, right? There's security.
Yeah, no, it's a quick transfer. I mean, I think, listen, we were in certain situations, and I believe that'll be probably with President and President-elect and Dr. Biden. I think they have a lot of stuff from a house to bring into this. The Obamas left their house in Chicago basically intact. There are times where, for example, President and Mrs. Reagan didn't have a house or didn't own a house when they moved into the White House. So they had a kind of house full of personal effects to bring. That makes a house much quicker, your own and homier, and, kind of immediately, I think, has a real impact, which is wonderful. But I also think it's a lot of logistics to do in 4 hours. So, we had the best of both, which is, so you see the chairs in this picture were ultimately recovered. I was able to use the sort of pin the bed skirt that was on that bed that I had lent to the Obamas, reuse the old bed skirt from the Bush bed, things like that. So, it was we had very big impact using, as you said, the new sheets, new towels, new bed, and then the art, and it went into a really wonderfully organized background. So we had the best of all worlds. They were completely comfortable and at home from day one.
And as you were planning the move-in, you were also presenting to the Obamas when they were staying at the Hay Adams from the beginning of January on, sort of your plans for what would happen when you started to really redecorate. And this is one of the renderings that you had given to them. Tell us about sort of that process and how it worked.
Well, I think that Mrs. Obama and the president, but Mrs. Obama in particular, who I spent so much time with in these early days, kind of going over stuff, was so. The children were her number one priority, to make sure that her children, who were moving from a really wonderful, but domestic scaled house into this, the ultimate living above the shop, a museum, people constantly around you. I think she was very concerned. Her number one concern was that her children be really comfortable on day one, and that there not be foreboding, or kind of, that they just could immediately start school and feel normal from day, the first minute that they were there. And we really worked at that. That was the number one thing. But then I think we tried to, it was, again, the master was really important for me, or primary bedroom, as we now say, was really important for me to get right, because I really had this idea that you want the leader of the free world, you want the commander in chief to get a good night's sleep, and you want a couple who's young and dynamic with children already stressed in many different directions, but especially adding all this to their plate, for them to be able to have some sort of retreat, so that they had a personal life beyond being in these big sort of hollowed spaces. So this is the renovation of that space ultimately. I was super lucky that Mark Matisak, who I worked with for a very long time, who's a really talented artist and collaborator, was able to help me produce these renderings. And what was great is they really communicated very directly this hybrid of style, this idea of White House, history and what had come before, but very much sort of weaving into it what would become sort of Obama style in the White House. And it was really important for me that they kind of understood the intellectual process about taking elements of their personality and things I'd seen at their house that I was sort of, sort of affected by, touched by, inspired by, the amount of books, the simplicity of what they were drawn to, the quality of what they were drawn to, and always the appreciation of much sort of cultural stuff, diverse, like African sculpture and paintings, and all sorts of things that they had already collected in their own house in Chicago, and really kind of taking that DNA and kind of expanding it outward into the way the White House would feel and live for them, but very much framed by all the weight of history and all these other, presidents and first families that come before.
Tell me about the canopy bed. I know that you talked me into a 4-poster in my apartment when I didn't really want one, and now I love it. Why do you use so many beds? What the canopy beds?
I mean, again, I think that there are elements about decoration which are not. I'm trying to think about that are experienced, that are immersive. I think they're things that are kind of almost primitive, and I think that as humans, we're drawn to these kind of cozy spaces, and you want to feel secure and sort of insulated and kind of protected. And I always feel that sort of the 4-poster bed is a kind of fusion of two great ideas. One is your sort of cozy space where you feel really protected and kind of, it's like your den, it's a cave for primates, whatever, that you kind of feel like you're really protected. And then you combine it with the height and the verticality. And there's a reason that sort of royal bedrooms and, over time, there's been these sort of high beds that they sort of give stature. So there are two things that I love sort of together. One is a kind of acknowledgement and a kind of raising up of people's psyche. which also do a really good job of it in the room. Just literally, technically, it's creating architecture in a room, right? It's a building in a city. Basically, you're creating this thing. And then fundamentally, I think when you sleep in a four-poster bed, I tend to think people sleep better because they feel like they're safe and somehow protected by this cocoon. So I think there are two things which go very well together. And I think there were two things which were essential to this bedroom. It's a big, giant, tall space. The bed added architecture and kind of literally worked as a visual step down from the ceiling, as does the chandelier, to make it more approachable. And then when you would climb in it, I think that you felt that the world was outside of your square of protectiveness. So whatever was happening outside, whatever unrest in the world, whatever financial crisis, whatever, I had this desire to create a kind of safe bubble where they could get rest and sleep and prepare for what they had to do the next day.
Okay, that makes sense. And then this is the other side of the room where you've moved the Whistler to over the fireplace. But you said they didn't really use the fire there. So
no, they didn't use a fire in this room. I mean, fires in the White House are not necessarily the most, I mean, anything that has all this curatorial issues and stuff. I mean, there were very few fires that would be lit, so they didn't use it very much. And then this shows, again, this kind of very shorthanded idea that only to me and very few people would make any sense. But this room, this is Gracie Square's wallpaper that is traditionally painted on with sort of chinoiserie scenes, and this sort of was this textural, again, there's a lot of rooms where there's texture or pattern on the walls in order to kind of compress them, bring them down because the rooms are so big, and make them more humanist in scale. But then also this had a kind of nice subtle undertone, this was a room that in various incarnations, including Mrs. Reagan's incarnation, had Gracie wallpaper with chinoiserie. So this had the texture and the wrap, if you will, of a very subtle pattern, but it didn't have the birds and trees and stuff on top of it. So there's, again, even in my own head, there's a kind of sort of slight, subtle, almost unseen connection to former presidents and their families and that choice of material.
Oh, hold it. We're not going to do this. Okay. Okay. So tell us about the private and public rooms. Like, what does the White House decorator really work on? It's an enormous house, but it's not as if you can do everything all together.
Right. No, I think I agree. And I think, there's certain things that come up for rotation in the public spaces that you're asked to comment on, a rug for the East Room or a curtain that needs to be redone in a different sort of public room. And that was something that I was able to do because the two administrations meant I didn't have 4 years to deal with it. I had 8 years to deal with it. But basically, listen, some families have done virtually nothing. It depends. I think, again, because there were 8 years, because this was a young, dynamic family who used this as a real family house, I think that it was important that rooms feel personal and domestic and approachable. Again, using the stripe that I made for the walls of the dining room, which is the family dining room that they used on their floor, was about not just creating kind of visual interest and holding contemporary paintings. It was about kind of bringing the room in a little bit because you can see how big it is. And I put a sofa in there, and you did tricks in order to make it really feel like a normal house as opposed to living in a sort of big palatial space.
Well, and I love this room because it reflects their focus, the Obama's focus on art and culture and the paintings. And it does really seem very full of life for a rather formal room with soaring ceilings. And I love the idea of high-low. I think you can see it here, the barn candle holders that are against
Pottery barn.
18th
Yeah.
mirror. Yeah, no, I think the high-low aspect of some of the things that you brought to the White House was really marvelous. And the family sitting room, I think, shows what you really did to personalize these spaces. I remember you telling me that Mrs. Obama had said that she wanted her girls to come home and feel like, come home from school and say, this is where we live. Like, it really is a
right,
home.
exactly.
And this is a room where they spend a lot of time, right?
Yeah, this is called 220. It's the family sitting room. It has been used and was used as President Kennedy's bedroom. Mrs. Kennedy was in what's the primary bedroom next door. I believe this is President Trump's bedroom now. But in what I loved, again, this kind of conduit, this kind of, this kind of whole reaching back to history. The high boy chest of drawers was in the exact same place when it was President Kennedy's bedroom. So there's this kind of always this like fun game for me to connect it to the past in some way. But this is a room that was for me the most pure distillation of White House history, the architecture, the doors, the stuff that is so identifiable, and the view making it the White House, but also the Obama style, right? Something, this Stefan Pagani light fixture, which they love and is now in their offices in Washington. This Roman Thomas furniture that in all these kind of beautiful hand weaves, this carpet I designed for Mansour that we made special for the room. So that, and art borrowed from the National Gallery. This was the sort of purest sort of, fusion, if you will, of what is personal to the Obamas, their desire for things which are a bit simpler, a bit qualitative in terms of hand of man and craftsman made, but combined with this background of the White House. And so for me, it was always really exciting because it's almost sort of like the creation of a style which is definable. This is very Obama-ish, right? Obama presidential in a way.
So you did a lot of decorative work there and filling it out and making it seem like a home for them. And there wasn't that much renovation work except for this room. Can you tell us about what you did here?
Well, something that I was always bumping up against, and something that I think is really important, and I think all great decorators or architects deal with first, which is the shortcomings of the space. And this you can see in the way that I sort of inherited. This is post-movement, so you see the big pieces of art, the San Francis on the right, the Ed Ruscha on the left. It's basically the room, the way that it sort of existed. And for me, the ability to not have light, to not have art lighting, to not be able to punctuate the room in some way, to not be able to read a book on a sofa or a chair, to sort of really have to struggle with a little lamp on the piano to play the piano if you're a child, made it something that was really important to me. And with Bob Clark, who's someone who's been very loyal and is sort of one of the country's most prestigious builders of big, sort of huge buildings and projects, he was really wonderful and offered to help. And with he and Robert Truex from San Francisco, who's an incredible lighting designer and lighting manufacturer, we came up with this plan to put sort of state-of-the-art LED lighting in, very, very discreet, as you see, but really punctuating the room and lighting the art, and also making the piano keys lit and making the girls able to do their homework in a chair. So it really took a kind of windowless space and really made it useful and brought it into the 21st century in a way which I think was really important.
A room that comes directly off of the second floor center hall is a yellow oval room, which I know you feel was the most beautiful and most romantic of the rooms there. And this is the version, Jackie Kennedy's yellow oval room, which I think inspired your work here.
Well, exactly. I mean, again, my obsession with history is profound. So the two kind of russet, I think you described them in the book as russet colored velvet chairs, were in the Kennedy room and then basically put away and hadn't been out since. But this room has a lot of elements that are super synonymous with the Kennedys. The three paintings that were owned in tandem with the National Gallery, the sort of French furniture that was gathered from various donors and people who basically sort of gave funds or furniture to the White House, including Brooke Astor and the Reitzmans. So this is my version of the room. I donated this carpet because I was found the perfect scale carpet that, again, funding is always an issue, and there was no real money to purchase it. So I bought it and donated it with this idea that it was so perfect. I had to do my part for future families and this White House. But this is for me the crystallization of my historical obsession with three first ladies and their White Houses. Clearly the Kennedys, which was the beginning and sort of set the form, if you will. I mean, everything from the way the White House is open, the way the White House is financed, the way the White House is protected, all comes from the work of very young First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy and the institutions and structure she put into place in a very short period of time. The next thing is someone who I was friendly with, which is First Lady Nancy Reagan, who I was very influenced by her desire to make these rooms cozy and and approachable and comfortable. And her version of this room had much more red in it, but was quite beautiful. And then, of course, on top of all of it, the taste and aesthetic and desire for practicality and comfort and beauty that is so synonymous with Michelle Obama. So here you see the room in one of its kind of configurations, but you see that people are comfortable. People are sitting in chairs. People are relaxed. They're not upright. They're kind of, really sitting in what is basically a grand version of a very, very beautiful living room.
And this was their living room. I mean, it was the more formal living room, but they did use it as a
living room. Completely.
Yeah,
completely
I love
living room. Yeah.
Those James Magny cocktail tables, I think, were so beautiful.
No, they're beautiful. Okay, and they added a kind of glamour to the room. Also, the yellow oval, I just want to say, is also the doorway to what is most important to many presidential families, which is their only backyard, which is the Truman balcony, which is great.
This, I think, was one of my favorite rooms in the White House, the Treaty Room, which is the president's private office and the family quarters. I know you used a Larson cloth, and then you stenciled this frieze. Tell me about did you talk to him about this? Was it something that you presented to him knowing what he would want? How did this come to be?
Well, I knew that I liked the vibe of the room, the spirit of the room, because it was so synonymous with the Spanish-American War ending and this kind of huge painting that used to be in the room that is a sort of sort of a document of this signing this great treaty. And it has a very much, in everyone's sort of version of the room, it has a very much looking west sense. It's always it has a kind of frontier feeling to it. It's kind of 19th century. And so I wanted to, again, in a very shorthanded way that was sort of organic, not a ton of color, but some color, really make it sort of a kind of fusion of what President Obama would like, but also the elements of the stencil and everything really are reflective of stuff even done during the Kennedy administration in the room, though much more elaborate. It has these kind of 19th century ideas in terms of some of the patterning and stuff. So even some of the chair shapes, the chair the president's sitting in from Baker was very much based on a 19th century kind of tufted chair. But it was, for me, this idea of juxtaposing this great Susan Rothenberg painting of a horse painted by, this Susan Rothenberg, who sadly died this year, but was painted at her ranch in New Mexico across from Caitlin watercolors, I believe early 19th century, from the National Gallery, that are about, sort of depicting and recording Native Americans in juxtaposition of things. The modern West, the documentation of the ancient West was sort of really important for me, because it felt like, this president came as far west as you can go, which is Hawaii. And so I wanted a room which had this sense of history, but also felt that it had a light hand of history, not heavy.
Compare that to the Oval Office, which was probably the most important or most visible room that you did, because many of the rooms that we've seen, actually very few people saw them until the book came out.
Right.
You had said the difference between furnishing and decorating is emotional activity, and I always felt that you felt very connected to the space and what it would mean to the president.
Well, look, I was really fortunate that I didn't do it right away. I mean, it was meant to be done more quickly, but there was a series of, we had one of the biggest financial crises in history existing. It wasn't a time to be redoing one's office. But when the country had a more stable financial position and things were a little bit more normalized, we could actually do it. And for me, I think, again, the stripe, which was super important to me to sort of give a sense of architecture and sort of reiterate the elegance of the shape, was also very much about trying to have the architecture kind of come forward, pop out a bit, to create a little bit of, often in that intense amount of lighting that's needed and constantly in the office, it's sort of camera ready at all times. You see former presidential offices that look quite washed out. And I wanted something that, again, felt approachable and warm and kind of could hold up to the intense amounts of light. So that was super important. And then, there's a lot of stuff in the book we talk about where, the president is all about things that are substantial and intellectual. I mean, even his new book, which is 700 pages, is about his capacity and appreciation and craft with the written word and the spoken word. And I think that things like the carpet being the decoration, if you will, is basically his favorite quotes in text. I mean, he's someone who really understands and appreciates text. And I think things like that were really important to fitting this space and making it personal to him and personal to this administration. And so that was something that was great, that I had the luxury of a little bit of time to kind of work on and distill that essence so that when I did the office, it could really reflect that.
And his private dining room actually works as sort of an adjunct office as well. How did you connect these two rooms in terms of the design?
Well, again, I think the color was very important. I think that I found a carpet, which we did for, his suite consists of a couple rooms. There's a tiny, small, really almost student office, like a kind of real working office where he could write, reflect. There was a chair and ottoman for him to read. I mean, it was a real kind of very small, almost meditative space. And then this dining room where, he really saw lots of congressional leaders. I mean, to be invited to the White House for lunch and with the president would be in this room. And simple, right? It would be a sandwich or something very, very simple. And there's pictures of the book, right? Well, there's that picture right there where you see John Boehner and Secretary and Speaker Pelosi and all having lunch with the president. And, it just was about trying to connect it with color. There's a lot of the same colors from the Oval are woven into these curtains. There's pressed birch bark paper on the walls that have this sort of sense of relating to the exterior of the building, the sense of stone, but it's a sort of handmade organic product, like the hand painted stripe in the outer office. So it's a subtler, more approachable version of the Oval, but something that he used with great success and really felt comfortable there.
And I love what you did in the state dining room. And here Mrs. Obama is at one of the the holiday parties for children that they had, but this is one of the few staterooms that you really became very involved in.
Right, exactly. And this room, I think people, again, the White House is such a funny thing because it's such a moving target, but because it moves so slowly, people think it's always the same. This room, as you know, was originally done by Stanford White for Theodore Roosevelt, and the paneling was mahogany. It was dark mahogany paneling. And at some point, somebody realized that to make it more ceremonial, more grand, that it should be painted out. And so it had always traditionally been painted in one color. And I painted it in three colors in a very kind of classic English manner to kind of pick out. You can see on either side of the Lincoln portrait, the sort of shafts of the columns are a different color than the Capitol. And, really trying to pick out the architecture and really make it a properly painted room. So that was really important to me. And then these curtains, there had been so many different various curtains over the years. Mrs. Bush had done curtains that had every color of every presidential china in them, which is kind of cool. I wanted something that again was a bit more tailored and more almost Jeffersonian, this kind of woven stripe, this silk and linen kind of stripe that was very pretty, that was woven in a mill in Pennsylvania. So again, trying to wherever anything came from, where anything was made, was really important to me and to this family.
And I wanted to show the contrast between the old family dining room. This is where the first families used to dine before Mrs. Kennedy made the private dining room upstairs. What this room was like, and then when you and Mrs. Obama turned it into really this amazing showcase for contemporary art. I think the contrast is enormous, and it's such a beautiful space.
It's a beautiful space, and I think again to energize it, it's a space that often is broken down and used for other, used for staging, used for other events. But it was really important, and I think that as a receptacle of 20th century art, this art was beautiful, including this Rauschenberg that was gifted to the White House by Robert Rauschenberg with a note. When he died, he didn't live long enough to see President Obama elected, but he was so inspired by it that he wanted to give a piece of art in honor of, President Obama becoming, president. He was really captivated by him. So you see this as a receptacle for that amazing art. Sadly, in this administration, a lot of this was put into storage, and this room was used as for a storeroom, which is sort of odd. Hopefully, it'll go back to its use. because it was such a wonderful thing to be able to have a place to house all these incredible paintings and bring the collection really almost up to this moment in terms of its timeline.
And I think it's so interesting. I mean, art, the contribution that you brought in terms of showcasing art in the White House is going to be one of your legacies, in addition to an important one for the Obamas. And I love that these are the binders that you would send to them with options that were available that weren't on view in museums, that weren't on display, that could be borrowed for the White House, and seeing their Post-its and their initials and things were important. And some of the works you brought were the Ed Ruscha, I think bringing photography to the third floor hall where it could be hung without sunlight affecting it. There's the Catherine Opie series from the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago were so beautiful, and it made it seem like windows in a space that doesn't really have windows. And then the importance of this Alma Thomas of Skylight, whose work was also hung in the old family dining room.
Well, right, that the work in the old family dining room was purchased with funds from the White House Historical Association, which is an amazing entity that always, through donations and through other fundraising activities, selling Christmas tree ornaments, they really work to add to the collection, to keep it, to do restorations, to do things constantly. And it's an extraordinary organization. I love the Christmas tree ornaments, and they really do make huge impacts in terms of keeping the collection kind of vital and moving forward. So the Alma Thomas, which was purchased in the old family dining room, is the first female African-American art ever in the permanent collection. So it's something that we're all super proud of.
And I think art meant so much to the Obamas and the White House. And then I know that you were very involved in choosing the artists who did their portraits for the National Portrait Gallery, which I suppose is your last official job as well. I think this was 2018, so 2 years after they left office.
Well, there's still 2 portraits to come for the White House. Don't forget.
We can't wait. You won't even talk to me about them. I know. I don't know. What is that? We've run out of time. But what would you like to have done that you didn't get to do?
Well, you know very well. I mean, there's a few things that I really would have liked to do. The one thing as a legacy I really wanted to leave is, though, again, everything was touched really wonderfully by the Bushes and kept in great order. Having gone to Camp David, and so many world leaders and people go to Camp David so doesn't look like Camp David looks in the movies. I mean, it's wonderful. The people who are there are kind of the best and are so extraordinary, and the treatment you get is just beyond. But the physicality of the cabins and stuff, I worked a little bit on the presidential cabin, but I had an arrangement with a variety of people, including Ralph Lauren and things like that, to really make Camp David into this kind of American showplace to reflect sort of our traditions, our aesthetic in a more profound way to sort of foreign dignitaries and leaders who come to stay there for conferences, et cetera. So that was one thing. And then there were certainly more contemporary art that I wanted to take into that were offered to us by foundations and institutions and stuff. It was wonderful to see a sculpture that is going in under this administration from the Noguchi Foundation, which is somebody that we certainly had talked to a lot, but we just ran out of time. And I think that there were a tremendous amount of other, because artists can't sadly be living when they go into the White House in the permanent collection, there's a series of rules, which makes sense when you look at them. Because of that, there were a bunch of foundations and families and stuff who had wanted to gift pieces. And again, we just didn't have time. So things like that, things like there's no real collection of silver, dishes beyond official presidential china are not really present. There's virtually no photography in the White House permanent collection. Maybe there's 2 or 3 pieces. Just stuff like that would have been great to be able to fill out and have as a resource and as a go-to for future presidential families to make the house their own, and to also make it reflective of the best of America, which was always our overriding theme and objective.
Well, we've also run out of time, actually. And thank you for doing this. It was such a pleasure to work on this book.
Thank you.
And actually to study the history of the White House, which is a major part of your book. It's not just a decorating book. So thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you to LCDQ, and thank you to Gail Singer and Serco. Thanks very
Thanks
much.
so much.
Talk to you later, Michael.
My name is Frances Anderton. I've been covering design and architecture for many years, most specifically on KCRW, where I have been hosting a show called DNA, Design and Architecture. It's really a huge honor to be part of a conversation about the great Paul Revere Williams, the architect who made such an impact on Los Angeles and is now getting really his due. There's a renaissance of interest in the work of this man. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it with two people who have both recently published books about his works. They're quite different approaches to discussing his work. One is by the architectural historian Stephen Gee, who together with architectural historians Mark Appleton and Brett Parsons has produced a book, Paul R. Williams. It's part of the Master Architects of Southern California, 1920 to 1940 series. His prior book was Iconic Vision, John Parkinson, Architect of Los Angeles. And we're also joined, such a pleasure, by Jana Ireland. She is a photographer and she has recently published a book by Angel City Press. The book is Regarding Paul R. Williams, a Photographer's View. We'll hear more about what she means by that when we get to her. But we're going to kick off quite quickly, if we can, with Stephen Gee. Just tell us briefly about Paul Williams. Who was he? What kind of work did he do? And show us some of his buildings, and then we will hear from Jana about her own interpretation of his work.
Well, Paul Williams is fascinating on so many different levels. I mean, primarily, I think he's fascinating because his story is so improbable that the idea that an orphan son of an African-American fruit and vegetable seller would go on to become really not only a successful architect, but by 1940, the architect and engineer really describe him as the dominant residential architect, on the west coast of the United States. Williams designs more than 3,000 houses, often working in neighborhoods that he himself wouldn't be allowed to live in. He was, according to the colleague Jay Johnson, who worked with him, a master of creative eclecticism. He worked in numerous styles and always had a sense of confidence about his work. His designs were graceful yet relaxed. There was a coherence to his design. Even though early on, particularly, he worked perhaps around the conventional demands of his clients, he always managed to offer signature elements, had a close attention to detail. And I think what really defines Williams' work is really a mastery of harmonious proportions. If you look at a Williams house, it's very graceful, it's very elegant. And, it's easy to understand why, people would have seen his properties and decided that that's the kind of house that I would have wanted. So, that's a little bit of an overview. I must say I'm a huge fan of Jana's work. I think she's done a wonderful job in interpreting him. And one of the difficulties about designing houses for rich folks is that rich folks always have enough money to come in and ruin them later. So I think Jana, you did a great job of bringing his work to life, and I really enjoyed your book.
Yes, agreed. And what's so interesting, obviously, about Paul R. Williams was the sheer breadth of his work. So yes, he was doing houses for rich people, which unfortunately these were in milieu that he himself might not have been welcome to, as you have just alluded to. And but then he also was doing housing for fellow African Americans and many civic buildings, and we'll hear about that too. Let's bring in Jana. Are you there, Jana?
I'm here.
It's so odd because I can only see one of you at a time. So anyway, there you are. So Jana Ireland, let's talk about you. And you come to this as a photographer, not so much as an architecture historian, but you're very passionate about architecture. Here's your book, front page, regarding Paul Williams. What does that mean exactly?
Well, regarding can mean looking at something or talking about something or holding something in regard. And that was a word that the publisher came up with for the title. We had to have Paul Williams's name in the title so that you would understand that it was a book about him, but you also had to make it clear in the title that it was about the work of an artist interpreting Paul Williams's work and not something that was biographical or using historical photos. It was really important that it be clear what people were looking at. So that's what the title was trying to accomplish.
And as we move through some of these slides, what will become very apparent for starters is that you come in the 2020 teens and you photograph all in black and white. But there's aesthetic reasons for that. Tell us.
One thing that photographing in black and white allowed me to do was really tie a lot of the different structures together. So Paul Williams worked for 50 years as an architect, and that means that there are 50 years worth of buildings to look at in lots of different styles, lots of different time periods. So photographing in black and white was a way to tie together all of those different kinds of structures and also to eliminate some distracting elements, like whether there's distracting paint or a distracting couch color, things like that are kind of flattened out by the black and white, and it allows you to look just at the architecture, or at least that's my intention.
And when you say distracting elements, I have to say, I think back to an image that we saw earlier when Stephen was talking, and there was a lot of frou-frou in that living room. And there was a very decorative quality to that living room that we just saw. I'm not sure what year it was, but there we go. Yes. So anyway, so what you've come in and done and is you've in a way sort of abstracted these rooms into a monochromatic and very sort of gentle presence. There's something sort of chiaroscuro about your images. Speak to the image that we just saw, actually, that just passed. The other aspect of your photographs that is so intriguing is how you sort of home in on elements of his buildings, like you've done here. What is this image, and what were you looking for?
This is actually a picture of his own house in Lafayette Square that he designed for himself and his wife. And one thing that pops up again and again in his designs are curves, really beautiful curves in walls and in ceilings and doorways all over the place. So I wanted to capture this curve on the outside of his house that was sort of, advertising isn't the right word, but that was sort of making that part of his interest in designing public in his own house, saying this is important to me, I guess. That's how I think of that curve.
And the front cover has a curve. So
yes.
Again, so those curves were inside, outside, every which way.
Yes, and in all different styles. And that doesn't mean that they're everywhere in every building, but as I continue to visit all of these different structures, I find that they pop up again and again, and I'm always looking for them.
So that's so interesting. And Stephen, chime in if you're there. On the one hand, Paul Williams is noted for his eclecticism. He was skilled. He was a master of multiple historical styles. And yet you did find, Jana, as you looked at his buildings, certain thematic elements that would come up. Did you find that as well, Stephen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You see a lot of the houses where you have like an oval entranceway that led to an oval, an oval porch that led to an oval entranceway. There were certain, undulating lines is kind of an obvious one, but I mean, the key thing I think also that repeats is the sheer attention to detail. Williams paid very close attention to detail all over his houses. I think it's quite easy you know, even if he was working in a style that might be familiar to you, to walk into a Williams house and know immediately that he did it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
When you look at his drawings, he really drew everything. He thought about everything and actually put it in the designs.
So,
I mean, so just to jump in, the very sort of exaggerated, decorated house you were looking at was E.L. Cord's house. He was, I guess, owned Auburn and Duesenberg automobiles. You know, it was a particularly extravagant commission for Williams. It was his first house that was over $100,000. It wasn't typical of Williams houses to go kind of that over the top, but you know, Cord was looking to make a particularly bold statement at the time. And one thing that was kind of interesting just about that house was I spoke to one of his Cord's relatives, who said that even though you see this very sort of historical or period inspired furniture, Cord was very insistent that he wouldn't sit on anybody else's chairs or lay in anybody else's bed. He wanted new modern furniture, you know. So when you look at Williams' story, it's often about Williams guiding his clients to, you know, to sort of compromise their ambitions and fit within the bounds of good taste, which clearly Williams had.
So, of course, one cannot talk about Paul R. Williams without talking about who he was, the person that he was. African-American, first member of the AIA, I think, west of Mississippi, and first licensed black architect, 1921. I mean, broke some glass ceilings, belatedly won the AIA gold medal, has fascinated so many people because of the indignities that he had to put up with in carving out this career, in working for these affluent white clients in whose houses under other circumstances he might not be welcome. Really, what an extraordinary situation to be in. Let's go back to Jana, because Jana, you have looked at Paul Williams through that lens as well as through your photographer's lens. Tell us, can you, about your particular concern with that aspect of Paul Williams' legacy?
Just as a Black person moving through the world today, it is very interesting to think about this person who was born almost 100 years before I was born, navigating the world and trying to build this career for himself, and knowing that I think in his generation and trying to be professional, there's no Instagram version of Paul Williams who's telling you everything that he's feeling or thinking. So there's a degree to which we'll never know how he felt about these things, how he dealt with these things. And I'm completely comfortable with the fact that I'll never know, but it's also something that keeps me thinking about his work and keeps me interested in finding more and more of his work, in addition to the work itself. So there are a couple things that keep me returning to this.
And you, Jana, are yourself very interested in what you've referred to as Black creativity. Can you just explain that a bit more?
Well, he was born in 1894. And as you mentioned, his parents were fruit sellers. And he was really a pretty unique person in terms of his professional career. But he wasn't, if he became who he was, in spite of all of the struggles, I have to think that there are hundreds and hundreds of people whose work we will never learn about, or who were never able to do that work. So when I think about his work, I think of it as the tip of the iceberg in terms of Black creativity in his generation. And I think about other generations who weren't able to really show what they could do and what it means to be making creative work now, and whether there are the kinds of opportunities to make creative work that I've had for everyone.
And in order to rise to the heights that he attained, Paul Williams was not just a master draftsperson and designer, he also was a man of great style. He was a great, considered to be very charming. And he, in addition, had to do something that no white architect would have had to do in the time, which was to develop certain kind of techniques to enable his clients or his potential clients to feel comfortable in his presence. Do you want to talk about that, Jana?
Sure. The story that most often gets told is about him learning how to draw upside down, which was both a tactic to keep a white client who was uncomfortable sitting next to a Black man from having to sit on the same side of the table as him, as well as a sort of magical thing that he could show someone and use to draw them into the work. So he was able to kind of do this performance of the drawing upside down, which I'm certainly really impressed people, and was a way to convince people who may not have worked with him otherwise that he was the person for the job.
Now, so Stephen?
Yeah, no, I was going to say also, I mean, if you look at an architect's career and you look at their journey to becoming successful, you know, many people have different paths. Paul Williams pursued a very narrow path whereby he entered a lot of competitions. So Paul Williams won national competitions, you know, which probably by all counts would have been fairly anonymous process. He would have submitted drawings, he would have submitted his name. It wouldn't be like today where they would go and Google him or find out, you know, or ask any personal questions about him. So he submitted these competition entries and won, you know, various significant competitions that established him really as a small home specialist, but also proved, you know, beyond any sort of real shadow of a doubt that he was better than most of the competitors that he would face if and it clearly wasn't, if it had been a level playing field, you know. So he had to go above and beyond to really prove himself, but he managed to do it, you know. And when I think about Paul Williams, you know, I think about the sheer determination, the number of times as a child that he was told that he really had no possibility of ever becoming an architect. It was a truly unrealistic dream for somebody like him to have, and yet he managed to find a way to do it despite all of these ridiculous obstacles that were placed in his way. So I think, you know, that there's a very sort of powerful human story to Paul Williams that is very inspiring in so many ways.
Indeed, but there was a sort of interesting, I guess, I don't know if the word is upside, but some sort of upside, perhaps, in fact, that you reference yourself, Stephen, in your book. You've quoted from a 1963 article in Ebony, where Williams himself wrote, and I quote, "Well-trained draftsmen and designers are in demand, and I have found that a Negro architect with a flair gets more publicity today than the average architect." Why did you pick that quote, and what did it tell us?
Well, I mean, it's in some ways it's a statement of Williams' survival. You know, that he managed to make it at a point where the system was entirely rigged against him. You know, and not only that, but he became so dominant. But in some ways, there's a certain sadness that goes along with that quote, because he's basically, you know, one of, if not the most dominant African-American architect in the United States. And he's getting a lot of attention because of the fact that he literally is one of a small handful that have really reached that level of prominence. So, you know, I just thought it was interesting to put that against the quotes from Paul Williams, you know, early career, when he's knocking on doors, trying to get jobs and getting rejected by people who he clearly knows have positions available, clearly knows that are looking for somebody with his type of skills, and he can't get them. And then, you know, you go through this whole career, you know, where by 1940, he's perhaps the most respected residential architect, or the most sought after, or one of them at least, in Southern California. And then moving into the 50s and 60s, and if there's a significant civic project that's up for bid, significant hospitals, you know, then Paul Williams' name is always in the mix. So I kind of thought that was interesting, and I, wherever possible in this book, if it was possible to allow Williams to tell his own story, express his own experience, we let him do it. And one of the things about Williams is that he did do a lot of interviews. He was sought after as a spokesman, I think, on a lot of issues that perhaps he didn't always want to be, but because he'd achieved a level of success that was really unparalleled, he became a public figure and a sort of a go-to interview. So I think it's just interesting that his career went full circle, and by the end of it, he'd achieved a really an incredible amount of success.
Jana, did you want to add to what Stephen was just talking about?
Oh, I think that those are excellent points. And just in terms of the way that he talked about himself and his work, he talked a little bit about that in his essay from 1937 in American Magazine, which this panel is named after. I Am a Negro. He talked about the ways in which his uniqueness in the field may have made him more appealing to some people, or may have made him interesting to people who might not have been interested in him otherwise. So I think there's a degree to which maybe there are people who worked with him just because they were curious about him. But also, I do wonder a lot about the ways in which his career was limited. What could he have done if he weren't limited in those ways? What would his career have been like if he didn't have to put up with the things he had to put up with, and if people were more open to him, to working with him?
Interesting question. He did build an astounding amount, hundreds, if not thousands of buildings. And I think something that all of us are interested in, and both you two are contributing to changing, is the fact that that Williams got recognition somewhat belatedly, even as he was so successful in his own time. And to what do we attribute that? Is it because he was a very eclectic architect, or was there a racial element to this? Can you at least speculate on that, Jana?
I think both of those things are true. I think that there's a degree to which other architects may not have recognized him during his time. So he might have been popular among people who were buying homes in California, and he might have worked with a lot of other architects who were his contemporaries, but maybe as a whole in architecture, he didn't get his due because he was doing so many different things. And people may have thought he doesn't have a singular vision, instead of he can do all of these things. And that is really incredible in itself, and not something that everyone can do.
Sure. Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with that. I think, one of the most exciting things about his archive going into the Getty is that we can really look at the latter periods of his career more closely now and understand some of the places that he did really experiment with. I think a lot of times when we talk about Paul Williams, because his story is so improbable, because it's so unlikely what he achieved, it's hard to almost get down to the nitty gritty of what he actually did. And when you get down to the nitty gritty of what you did and see how innovative he was, how he experimented with different forms, how, his work with Quincy Jones and others was really sort of groundbreaking, and he would use it almost, he said he used, for example, the Palm Springs Tennis Club as a laboratory to experiment in different techniques. Once as historians, you get a chance to really sort of dig into what he did, then I think the perception of him and the perception of what he changed will evolve. And you will see that the modern work that he did was incredibly important. His openness to new technologies was incredibly important, and it's not really been discussed in a way that perhaps it should have been. But I have to be honest with you. I spend a lot of time reading about a lot of different architects that I think deserve deserve more attention. But you know, William's story is truly remarkable.
Yes, and I get to go back to Jana, and we're looking again at a single family house of Williams, but just remind us of the breadth of his work. You went to Las Vegas, you went to all parts of LA, finding projects. Just bring us up to speed on that part of Williams's legacy.
So the project started in LA, just kind of what could I get to in Los Angeles, and it really started with residential projects. But as I kept working on it, I was able to go to Las Vegas, as you said, and get out of LA County a little bit and just start looking at homes that he designed in other places and different kinds of structures as well, looking at churches and mausoleums and just kind of beginning to get into the real variety that existed in his work. And it's still something that I'm working on getting a handle on. I'm hoping to go to Reno, Nevada. I'm working on a project with some people in Nevada, so I'm trying to get more of his work in Nevada outside of Las Vegas. I'm also hoping to get to some buildings that he designed on the East Coast. He was really a Southern California architect, but he designed things all over the country and in South America as well. So there's a lot to look at and a lot to learn about. And I'm also very excited about the Getty USC acquisition of his archives and what that might mean for the future of my scholarship of Paul Williams and for what other people are going to do. I think there's going to be some really wonderful work about him coming up soon.
Well, that dovetails perfectly with our time out, which is right now. Jana Ireland, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. Stephen G, likewise, always a pleasure to work for you. I want to make sure everybody knows about the books regarding Paul R. Williams, A Photographer's View is Jana's book. Paul R. Williams, we emphasize the R these days, don't we? Revere. Paul Revere Williams, Master Architects of Southern California. Stephen and Jana, thank you.
Thank you, Frances. Always a pleasure. And
likewise. And
Stephen.
And thank you, LCDQ Strong, staying strong for this year's Legends online. Thank you for watching this panel.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to LCDQ Strong 2, the Digital Summit. While we are very sad not to be in person with you this year, we are very happy to be gathering from afar. I'm Lindsay Shuck, Editorial Director of California Home and Design, and I'm very thankful to be here with two of California's most iconic design figures, architect and author Paul McLean of McLean Design, and top interior designer Annette English. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
And I'll say collaborators, which we'll get into in a bit.
Yes.
Friends.
And friends.
Yeah.
And friends.
Most important. I think we can all agree that in today's world, the home has become the most important staple of our lives. So during this discussion, we'll explore how contemporary living has come to this place that it's in now and what it might look like in the future. So I'd like to start with a question for both of you. Paul, we can start with you if you'd like.
Ladies first.
Okay, Annette, to you first. What is your definition of today's contemporary home in California? Because, for me, being an editor that sees so many different styles in California, it's hard to totally pin down, even though there is kind of a look we get, right? So I'm just curious what you think today's contemporary home is in California.
So for me, today's contemporary home in Southern California is sort of these beautiful monolithic spaces that are dominated with clean lines, lots of glass doors, windows, walls that really blur the indoors and the outdoors, and that sort of create this expansive view for the eye to sort of see the nature beyond. And I think that they're lovely, and I think it's tough to actually build a really beautiful modern home because you can't have sort of like the crown moldings and things like that to sort of like hide the details. But I think they create a sense of well-being. There's a lot of spatial drama, especially in Paul's homes. But it really is about bringing the indoors out, the use of sort of consistent materials. So once again, you use some similar materials on the inside and the outside, so your eyes just traveling to the views and beyond.
Right. What about you, Paul?
I think Annette said it perfectly. I hardly have anything to add. I completely agree. I mean, I've always been in love with California contemporary design since I was a kid, and that's what drove me to come here in the first place. And I feel like it's for me, it's that balance between nature and view and sight. And there's a great openness in California to exploring ideas. And it goes back like 100 years. I mean, I think it goes all the way back to the beginning of the film industry. Like people would create these fantasy films and then seem to come home to fantasy design. And we can see that even all over places like Hancock Park, you know, all these different types of homes and styles. But this idea of modern living really took hold here in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And, you know, there was a thing about health behind it, the idea that sunlight and access to the outdoors would give you benefits in terms of your health. And I think that's something that carries through to today, especially in the times we're living, that we are so fortunate to be able to design these homes that have this great connection to outdoors. And we try really hard to make that boundary go away as much as possible.
You do a very good job of it.
Thank you.
You know, you have an extensive, your work is prolific throughout Southern California. However, you know, each of your projects to me is very unique. How do you really, you know, how do you and the team achieve this balance?
You know, the funny thing is I really don't think about that. And I think that's part of it. I start by looking at site and listening to our clients and their programs. And I really want, when we talk to our clients, I want them to feel like it's their home. And I don't worry about style because I think that comes innately through the process. And at least for me, there is, you know, I never think of having a style, but then, you know, you look at all the pictures and like, oh yeah, I guess we do. You know, it's like there's similarities. But, you know, there's a lot of things you find on site that start, you know, that you see first as a blank piece of paper, but there's so many constraints. And especially in suburban Los Angeles, you know, there's, sites can be limited in size, but there's, for example, the view is in one direction, you know, the access is another direction, and maybe things that you need to edit out. We call it spatial editing. So you might look out, maybe there's a busy road or an ugly roof down below. So we'll think, okay, well, what if we put a body of water there to stop people from moving all the way forward and seeing that road? What if we use the sound of water to mask a busy street, or use vegetation to screen a power pole? So there's this idea of spatial editing, and that comes from site and direct response to site. And then there's like the client themselves, like what is it they dreaming about? What is exciting for them? And you put that whole puzzle together, and then, you know, out it comes, I guess, on the other side.
So it's almost the limitations, that kind of.
Yeah, I think of them as opportunities. You know, they're not really limitations. Here, they're. You know, there was a house I did recently, and it came together so fast, and it was because those constraints were so obvious. You know, right now I'm working on a house in Florida on this beautiful lake, and there's so much room, and it's like, gosh, where do I put everything? You know, it's like totally different to my usual cliffside, like hanging on by your fingernails on the cliff to try and get the house to work. So the constraints can really be helpful. They're an opportunity to work with.
Are there many, like, since you've worked around the globe, really, how would you define the constraints in California versus other places you've worked?
There are, you know, it's interesting because our clients that we have that aren't here are looking for a California house. That's why they hire us. Otherwise, they would get someone local to do it. So our biggest challenge is the other way around in a way. It's like trying to we want to respect local culture and local traditions, but we have to bring that in a way that reflects the type of work that we do here. So I think California, obviously, we have seismic codes, which for me are always like the bane of my existence. That and the California Energy Code, because the California Energy Code wishes everything was made of brick or concrete and not glass. And you only have to look at the pictures to see that's not really where we go. Those are uniquely Californian issues. But, most places we work have similar constraints. Like in Florida, they have hurricanes versus, you have to deal with the same type of forces. They're just coming at you rather than from under you. And obviously in California, prices are very high. It's a very expensive real estate market, but in some ways that can work to our advantage because people invest so much in the property that they're willing to, invest in a house that merits being on that property.
True. Annette, you have an extensive interior design career in California. What has been the biggest shift in what clients want from a home that you've seen?
I spent 10 years in San Francisco where I actually started my career, and I've been in LA for 20. So I have seen some.
You can't possibly be. You must have been 5 when you started.
I'm 33. 33. So I have seen a lot of changes, and I think specifically living in Southern California, people really want to take advantage of the climate and having this sort of blurred vision between sort of like the indoors and the outdoors. And we live in such a frenetic world these days that I think people are looking for a sanctuary. They're looking for homes that are state of the art, whether they're, having home theaters or spas or salons. So I think, home just continues, like we're raising the bar and our clients are raising the bar. And, so it's just like this continual organic stepping up of sort of like meeting like clients' needs and demands with technology. Technology has really sort of aided us in what we can do and provide, and with clients wanting like state-of-the-art homes, they want to be able to like have a smart home where they can manipulate their home with a push of a button from their iPhone and work their home from afar, whether that's turning on the music or changing the lighting or opening window treatments or setting the mood or the tone. And we have one client right now actually who's using this state-of-the-art lighting system, which actually simulates the lighting outside. So if it's sunny outside, it brings the same type of lighting inside, which is all about creating a sense of wellness. Wow. So I think it's come a long way from where it was 20 years ago, and technology is part of that.
I think my life would be much healthier if I could just push a button in my home, be clean all the time. But
I know, me too.
We haven't figured that one out yet.
That'll be next.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to know, Paul, because you do seem to me quite modest about your work. It's just how do you define your style, and how do you think it's made an imprint on the Southern California aesthetic?
Well, I'm not trying to be modest, but I mean, there's so many spectacular architects that have, blazed a pathway in Southern California. It's an inspiration around the world. And that was where my inspiration came from. That's what got me here in the first place. Growing up in rainy Dublin and looking at pictures of houses like Albert Frey's house in Palm Springs, or the Richard Neutra house out there, or the Lovell house, it's like, that's just such an inspiration for me. So my style, I think, is derivative from that. I think what's great for me to be alive and practicing now versus for a lot of those architects was that they were the true trailblazers, not us. And but they didn't really have the technology to do it right. You go to some of these homes and you've seen them in magazines and books since you were a kid, and they're fantastic and it's exciting to get there. And they're like, that's not really aluminum, that's wood painted to look like aluminum.
Right. I agree.
The glass is probably an eighth of
black material, advancement was
or like the glass is an eighth of an inch thick, and you're either freezing or boiling inside there. So I think that what we've been able to do is take a lot of those ideas and build on them and create homes that work better for people today. And I think that was probably, for me, just if I can waffle on a bit more, the thing about contemporary design was that there's some brilliant people that started the ideas, and then we had the post-World War period where a lot happened very quickly, and a lot of things that were very cheap happened, and people have, in many countries found like modernism to be a turnoff, because it was just like cheap materials thrown together and no ornamentation, and so on. But I feel now we've kind of passed by, improved, and now we're building much better homes, and people, that's why modernism is so popular again now, because the true things that it represents, like connection to nature, health and well-being, indoor outdoor living, all of those things, you can really achieve them today, and then people respond to that. There was a great story years ago. I designed a house in southern Germany. I nearly got fired 3 times because I kept designing contextual houses in the village. And then my client says, if you don't design a California house for me soon, I'll get someone else. So I'm like, fine. But his wife was from Chile, and she lived in traditional, Spanish homes in Chile her whole life. And when she moved into me, she said, I don't think I'll be able to live here. I feel like I'm in a fishbowl. Everything is open. I can see for miles in every direction. I don't feel homey at all. 3 months later, I visited her, and she said I could never go back. And we sat there in the kitchen. It was a February morning. There was 2 feet of snow outside. We watched hawks like dive bombing to pick up their food in the fields, and you're just like, wow, this is spectacular. So I think once you go down this path, it's really hard to go back to living in a traditional home.
Agreed. I think it's transformative. I'd love to get into a little bit more about your dynamic between the two of you.
Great.
And I understand that you are working on a project together, and I wondered if you could share how that process has been so successful for you.
Well, I think probably I'll start, because Annette is so great, and that's the project behind her, that she's in the garden right now. But I think, she has a great team. She's a brilliant designer, and we've just so immensely enjoyed working with her. And they come to us with new and creative ideas, and it's a joy to sit there and look at all the options. And right now, it's a real joy to visit the site and see them become real. Because when was it, 2 years ago when we did that whole presentation?
Started.
I've forgotten some of the things that you came up with, and then it's like, wow, that looks so cool, and there it is. So. That's
lifetime of a home, huh? The project.
Yeah.
And what about you, Annette? What have you learned from Paul and his team?
I would say that, first of all, I really admire Paul's work. And beyond admiring his work, I really think he's a wonderful person. And he's down to earth, he's fun, and he's really humble. So we've been on this
rare in architects.
Huh?
Which can be very rare with architects.
It can be really rare with architects, but I also think, like, I'm from Australia, Paul's from Ireland, and I don't know if it's that we're foreigners, but I feel like we have some similar values here and there. But so we've been working on this project, collaborating on this project for 2 years, and I've known Paul for quite a few more years than that. And I think the success in part is that neither team has any ego. Yeah. And so our team is able to go to Paul and say, hey, how about this idea? Would you be willing to incorporate this into your idea, into the house? And they're like very, very open, and vice versa. So there's this great sort of like team play without any ego. And I think when that happens, it's really to the benefit of the project. And when you're committed and passionate about creating something extraordinary, and you leave the ego at the door and you play together as a team, I think you really sort of can elevate the end result. And I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, I think
project.
Couldn't agree more. But I think it is important that team building. I mean, what would be the point of bringing Annette and her talented team on board if you weren't willing to step back and let them explore? There's no point otherwise, right? If we're just going to dictate to you what to do, or vice versa. So, but we always feel, I feel like as an architect, your job is like, there's a design, and that you have to try and communicate to people like what is the intention behind the design. But it's a group project. It's not like my design, it's everyone's design. And I try and be the person who kind of keeps steering it in the right direction, in the sense, rather than dictating what has to happen, because I feel like everyone's going to contribute their best if they feel that their ideas have been listened to. But you also have to make sure that it keeps going in the right direction, because, you know, obviously if it was, you know, everyone just threw any idea they want in there, you know, it might just end up being a bit of a mess, right? But mostly, you know, there's so much talent out there, and it's not just like on the design side, but on the construction side as well. And you have to not forget that these people that we build these houses with, that's what they do for a living, right?
Yeah.
You know,
and they're the best of the best.
They are. So we would be, you know, incredibly silly not to take advantage of that for all of our sakes.
And they take on so much liability. I've always feel
yes.
the end of this, you know, of the business is so underappreciated because it's the biggest part.
I know they get none of the credit, you know?
I want to touch quickly about, you know, the story you were talking about with Germany and how the client felt, you know, overwhelmed by glass, really, right? And the access of looking in. You know, and the majority of your projects feature a lot of glass, but, you know, you're working with you know, huge windows. You're working with, you know, some of the world's most elite and private people. So I'm really curious, aside from landscaping, if there are tricks you can share of how you create intimacy while still giving this, you know, huge transparency.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a client who's a well-known actress, and we struggled with that. You know, the point is she wanted the view, but the view went back to her too. You know? So how do you resolve that problem? And we have another, a well-known singer that we have a pool on the roof, and it's like the helicopters are buzzing around and she never can use the pool. So we've been coming up with solutions to that, which really involve planting vines and planting trellises in that particular case. But I think, you know, these homes, a lot of our homes are view homes, and obviously people buy those sites because they want the view. So we try and make sure that in the foreground that we take care through that spatial editing process of immediate privacy concerns. There's only so much we can do about people further away. You know, one of my clients we did recently has a beautiful bathroom which, you know, overlooks, you know, a canyon in Los Angeles, and, you know, he showers in there, and, you know, the other people are way across the canyon. His point is like, well, if they really want to make that much of an effort to see me showering like for 5 minutes a day, you know, I guess have at it, right? But I think in terms of intimacy, that is a really great point. And, you know, I think that for us, a lot of the beauty of our homes is not the house itself, but the environment around them. So we're trying to bring that environment in. So it's, in some ways, it's a little bit like camping on a big scale, right? Luxury camping, because, you know, you're aware of the outdoors the entire time that you're there. But we also try to create more intimate spaces. I think it's very important that when you have these big open environments, that you also create places where people can feel that they can nest a little better. So my contrast, excuse me, a vaulted, beautiful, great room with a quiet library space with a fireplace, and where you can get away from that view. And also, I think, you know, it's important that you don't just have those more private and more intimate spaces be bedrooms. You know, like you want to create a secondary public level to the house where people can congregate together. And, you know, the last thing we want is everyone dispersing to bedrooms if we can manage that, you know, with our budget.
And I think a lot of the intimacy and softness of contemporary homes comes from the actual, you know, interior design part of it.
It does, yeah. Annette.
Screens, the furnitures, you know, and I think that's what Annette brings to the conversation, you know, is how do you really balance and create more softness and intimacy in these homes?
You know, it's a really great point. When I started out many years ago doing these very elaborate homes, that was a question I thought, you know, how am I going to do that? And I've learned that there's many ways to create intimacy where, you know, maybe we put wood on the ceilings. I think a lot of it is about volume, and maybe you've got these very, very tall ceilings, but you'll have like a lighting pendant that sort of like cascades down, and then you'll have a floor lamp that like sort of meets in between. And so there's never like this huge gap or volume between the floor and the ceiling, even if it is structurally, it's like we're installing things that bring it together, that make it feel homey.
How large is like the scale of a light and the
Yeah, it's all about scale, and it's all about the materials that can create the warmth. And so there's kind of like lots of little, they're not even tricks, but just things that you learn along the way that create the intimacy. Because I swear, every client who builds a contemporary home, they still want an intimate sanctuary to come home to. They don't want a cold box.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard a few big designers say comfort is the new luxury.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this leads me to one of my last questions, because we've been speaking about intimate areas in the home, and I can personally attest to having a husband that's now fully at home and a 5-year-old that I have had to. I'm thankful to be in a non-open floor plan home right now. So I'm curious on both of what both of you think the future floor plan looks like. Do we still continue to have this grand openness? Do we just create more different, more smaller spaces outside of the main living areas? What does it look like as a result of the pandemic?
Can I go?
Yeah.
For me, what I see, I think we will have a continuation of these open floor plans because people want to be together, and they like being close to their children. If their children are doing homework or whatnot, everyone wants to be together in the home. And as I touched on before, we live in like such a frenetic world, not just in Los Angeles, but everything that's going on in the world these days, that home really has become a place of, we want to find well-being, we want to be wrapped up, in a cocoon. And so I think that with people working from home more, they're going to be tricking out their gyms if they haven't already. They're going to be really focusing on what their home offices look like and just making everything sort of at their fingertips. And I think that post-COVID, it'll be really interesting to see where we go and what sticks from this new norm that we have and how we live. But I think the bar will be raised for Paul and myself and other interior designers and architects to how do we create a new level of home for people to just feel well and love being there, where they can work from and
entertain each other. And I think you mentioned it perfectly, that it needs to have just, everything be at the tip of your fingers.
Yeah, and then when you put that key in the door at the end of the day, you come home, you just feel like your house is going to wrap its arms around you. And we all want that. We all want our sanctuary. So
how about you, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, sanctuary is a great word. I think that's not going to go away. I think maybe we'll have to be a bit more creative, and that issue of public space is really important. I had a conversation yesterday with a client on site, and he has a 2-year-old, and he's busy creating a playroom in the basement, where all the toys can be and whatever. And I'm just saying to him, we all love these more open floor plans, because it really gives you the sense of space and volume that lets you kind of lifts you up a little bit and gives you that opportunity for connection to everybody else. But, it's just not going to work for people. Hopefully we will all be, going back to normal sometime next year. But I think a lot of people have discovered that they can do more work at home, but it's not necessarily, as you know yourself, Lindsay, if your husband and your kids are there trying to get something done, it's a challenge. So we're going to have to create ways because again, I feel really strongly about that idea that we don't want to turn all our bedrooms into, temporary offices or Zoom school, So thinking of ways that we can allow multiple people to work in the home, as opposed to the old program would be people would come in and say, okay, well, I want, X number of bedrooms and a living room and media room and one office, and that was as much thought that was given. But now we're trying to have people think about, okay, well, how many people are going to work in this office? And are they going to be able to work together or separately? Will you maybe have an employee come to the house? Because that might work.
Our client for a meeting, right?
Yeah, for a meeting, or especially if we're thinking post-COVID, And then what about business people that you don't necessarily want them to see your whole house, or like you said earlier, you have to magically clean the house, like a way that you can just do that without losing your privacy as well. So a little more complicated and a little more interesting, I think, approach.
I definitely envision more bars being requested for homes in the future.
There's definitely more bars.
Well, I'd love to end with one question to both of you, and either one can start. I think, being that both of your careers are very extensive, that you do, I think, in some sense, hope to leave an impact for future designers and architects. And I'd love to hear from both of you what you hope your work will leave for those who follow.
You go,
Paul.
Well, funnily enough, yesterday I was doing a lecture with University of Pennsylvania architecture students. So that it's a great question, Lindsay, coming off all their interesting and complicated questions about how you start a business. And I felt like I was having to be almost like a counselor. It's a great industry to be in. I mean, to me, for them, I said, just follow your passion. Architecture and interior design is such a broad field. I have a friend in Philadelphia, and she just programs, for corporations, so that's her job, is to actually talk to everybody and figure out how this new building is going to work. And then she hands it off to an architecture firm that designs it. So it's a very broad field. For the students, I think I try to tell them, be optimistic. I mean, the main thing is, if you love what you do, you'll be successful. And there are lots of ways to measure success. I keep telling my own kids that, it's like, success is not based on your bank account. I never got into this thinking about money. It was all about wanting to design. And so I hope that there's optimism in our work, and I hope that people will, over time, will appreciate the optimism and the sense of fun and excitement and an emotional connection to the work. That's what I hope that people will get out of it long term. And I hope that another president said, the arc of justice is very long. But it's going in the right direction. We have bumps along the way, big road bumps sometimes, but hopefully they speak to a better future, a better, more optimistic future, a connection to nature. I hope people get out of that, just their surroundings, to be aware, and that it brings them peace and happiness.
And before you speak, and I'd like to just quickly add, I admire your work because some of the modern specs that I see in homes throughout Southern California, they just maximize the lot and they don't take advantage of the environment. And I think your work does, and I hope that will be something people follow. So thank you for that. And Annette, how about you?
So for me, I sort of carry on the heels of what Paul just said, but I'd like to add that for me, I've really had a lot of joy, and I hope to continue having joy creating beauty and putting beauty out there in the world, and really impacting my clients and their families and creating homes for them that they love, they feel safe in, they enjoy bringing their friends over to. And so for me, my goal and my purpose with what I do is bringing joy to others, and really just creating beautiful spaces and collaborating with wonderful people that just sort of like elevate, my work and the world. And, I feel really, really privileged to be doing what I'm doing. And I think that for the young people of the future who want to get involved in our field, it's like the sky is the limit. It's like technology is going to continue to expand, and there's just, everybody's always going to want a home, and everybody's always going to want to feel safe and well in their home, and this sense of wellness. So I'm glad that I get to contribute in that way.
Wonderful. I would say my two favorite things are music and design because they're infinite.
Yes.
So much possibility. Well, I'd like to open it up for some questions. If anyone watching has any, you can type it in the chat, and I'm happy to repeat them and have them answered. And if not, sorry, someone's trying to call me. And if not, we can end it here. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for sharing your time and your space and your energy, because I know you're on many Zooms and trying to manage kids and homes and, anything else that's going on in this world. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your contributions to our community, because it's what's made us so impactful around the globe. I do have one question. Someone would like to know if we could speak about sustainable materials and how much, what are the requests you're seeing from clients for sustainability? Paul?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, we're lucky to be in a state that takes sustainability seriously. So we're already at a distinct advantage in that the way the California energy codes are written, much as they can be the bane of our existence. When people talk about LEED, if you just happen to be building a modern home in California to the Title 24 requirements of the state, you're 70% there, right there. So we're very fortunate that way. It is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and the thing about it is it's not a zero-sum game. It's like the more sustainable the homes are, the better the quality of life in them is. We find that our homes, obviously, we do a lot of large homes, and they consume a lot of energy. And even if we can't get our clients on board, from a sustainability perspective, we can get them on board from the point of view of like, we can lower your energy bills if we take the following steps. So we haven't really got into materiality. Maybe you can speak to that, Annette, in terms of what people are thinking with COVID and so on. I'm not sure. For me personally, I don't know how much legs that has long term. We'll probably.
I have a question for you with that. Do you, because I actually don't know this about your work, but do you only work with ground up, or do you work with renovations as well and preservation?
You know what? And I know it's not on here, but my favorite project that we did in the last 10 years is a complete rework of a 1903 four-story mansion in Pacific Heights in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. What was good and bad about that was that this dear old house had survived the 1906 earthquake. She didn't really survive the Army and Navy when the boys came back from the war. They cut it all up into tiny little apartments. And we were able to take that house and we were able to strip it down, seismically retrofit it. We lifted it up in the air. Every time I saw that, I was terrified. I said, what if an earthquake happens? And we put a whole garage underneath it. We took part of the back of the house off and put like a hot tub on the roof with the most gorgeous view of the city. And I feel like, we took that house and we set her on her way for another 100 years. Some architect 100 years from now is going to be looking at the mess we made and trying to fix it. But for now, she's on her way. She's got a new lease of life. It's like a total facelift, and off she goes. So that's one of my favorites.
I asked just because I think we always focus on materials and panels, but I also believe strongly, and I know it's more of a pain in the tail in terms of permitting and things and building, but to maybe try and preserve structures and just update them so that we do also maintain some character. And it is sustainability at the end of the day, because we're not wasting materials per se. So
yeah, if I could add one more point before I know on that, it's like that's always been something I felt strongly about. I personally am not in love with the idea that you have, say, a 1920s Craftsman cottage and you stick a super contemporary addition on the back. I feel like you should respect the structure and work with what you have and do something that suits it and is in keeping with it and love it for what it is, right? And there's always an opportunity to do your nice, cool contemporary house somewhere else, right? So anyway, Annette, sorry.
And so are you getting a ton of requests for sustainable materials? And then I think the other point was brought up, antimicrobial finishes and materials. Yeah. No.
What was the last bit?
Antimicrobial finishes. Are you getting requests for those as well?
No.
I think
not as yet, but definitely sustainable. I mean, we primarily, the majority of our work is ground up construction, also like Paul. Earlier in my career, we were doing a lot of remodels, and clearly in that domain, you get to recycle, repurpose materials, and you're not starting from scratch and building new. But also within this new construction, I mean, we do get a lot of requests from clients to use reclaimed, repurposed materials, or whether it even comes from the furniture that they're using. They have some vintage antiques that they want to continue to use or give a new lease of life with reupholstery, certainly solar panels, reclaimed beams or reclaimed floors. So we can still do really modern projects and maybe have like reclaimed floors, but everything else is like ultra modern,
Right.
but just give it some sort of like tweak. So I think people do care about that, and climate change is so front and center right now that we all need to be thinking that way, and that we need to be educating our clients on what their options are, because they probably don't know. So I think it's our job to do so.
Yeah, I agree. And I know no problem. There's a few groups who asked firms to commit to, less waste during demos. So, I think in the next 5 years, our industry will actually be a leading, providing leading solutions in this issue, I hope. And so
I think so too.
Yeah, I want to end with one more question that I always ask, because it doesn't look like we have any more in the chat. I would love to know, I'll start with you, Annette, what you're most thankful for right now.
What I'm most thankful for is family, friends, help, clients, my team, my cat, and the fact that I get to the fact that I get to do what I love, all the time. And COVID has been a difficult time for everybody globally. And I love to travel. It's one of my favorite things for myself and my husband, but it's looking for the small pleasures whilst we're sort of in this new normal for the moment. But I try to find gratitude in the here and the now, and with the people that I'm around every day, and the beauty that I see. So nice. Thankful for this opportunity.
How about you, Paul?
I couldn't have said it better. I mean, everything Annette said, including the cat and the dog, because we have a dog. But I think also on top of all that, because I agree like 1,000,000% with what you just said, everything, but I also feel, COVID has been such a disaster for so many people. And for me and, for us, I mean, for all our petty complaints and stuff, I feel like in many ways, so far at least, we've been more inconvenienced, than impacted. And that's for myself, I'm so, thankful for that, but I'm so worried about so many other people whose lives are decimated, whether it's by the disease itself or family members dying or, not having any work or not having enough food. I mean, we don't have to worry about those things, so, there's so much to be thankful for. The world has been very kind to us, even in these difficult times.
Well, I'm very thankful for you both being here. I'm very thankful for this technology because it allows us to come together in our sweatpants, albeit and just unify together. And I think be in a much simpler place as a community to help make the world more beautiful. So thank you again for your time. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to doing it one day in person. And thank you.
We hope so too.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you, Paul.
And I hope we can actually do this in person next May with fingers
crossed.
So
fingers crossed.
Yep.
Okay.
Bye.
Hi there, and welcome to a panel that I am calling Kitchen in the Time of COVID, which of course is not its real name. So the things that we know, for example, is the kitchen is the community center of the house, COVID or not. And over the past 3 decades or so, the kitchen has migrated from this totally utilitarian fluorescent light, formica counter, linoleum floor kind of a place into something that in fact is unquestionably the most important and certainly the most used room in the house. It goes from a place where meals are prepared and eaten, of course, and now it's become the classroom and the homework room, the media center, the telephone room. Honestly, it is now not only practical, but it's also experiential. So we have invited 3 designers to talk about the kitchens they're designing today and what things are necessary. I mean, we know generally what they are, but we're going to talk about them in depth. So we've got Catherine Ireland, whom I've known forever. And Catherine, of course, has had several really interesting careers prior to her very successful career as an interior designer. So she's been a clothing designer, she's been an actress and a filmmaker, and I personally can vouch for the fact that she is a hostess extraordinaire, and she seems to know people everywhere. And just as an aside, I can tell you about the night that we followed her all over Venice in our high heels, trying to find the house of a friend, some palazzo somewhere. Anyway, I still laugh when I think about it.
Venice, can we say it was Venice, Italy, not Venice, California?
Oh, yes. It was Venice, Italy, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, it was great fun. But Catherine, in fact, is known for her very charming interiors, casual and lighthearted. They always seem to have lovely prints, some vintage finds, and they're really a true reflection of the people who live in the houses that she decorates. And I'm sure many of you are totally envious of her fabulous house in the south of France. I personally am, for sure, and the glorious lunches she serves on her beautiful terrace. So next we have Ryan Sagian he is part of a really close-knit community of Persian Jews living in LA. That felt so important to me because I've never known anyone a Persian. I don't
well, there's always a first.
And I'm so happy about that. So the thing that I think is kind of cool about Ryan, in addition to his really amazing work, is that he has built his business, and he can do this because he's 12 and a half, basically on Instagram. It's way out of my league, but I think it's quite a remarkable thing. What we do know is that Ryan draws on Hollywood glamour for inspiration, Tony Duquette, and then Dorothy Draper as well. So I call him a young up-and-comer. And so we've got lots of years to watch Ryan develop his practice. And Allison Pickard actually joins us from San Francisco and Chicago. And what she says is something that I actually believe totally and completely, and that thoughtful architecture can't exist without great interiors, and the reverse. Great interior design can't exist without really thoughtful architecture. Hers is what I would call an eclectic style that's both layered and luxurious. And her work has been published in just countless magazines. The other thing I thought was sort of interesting about Allison was that there was in the header of her website something called frippery. I went, frippery, what on earth is that? So I went poking around, and Allison, it turns out, is an incredible jewelry maker. She makes these beautiful pieces of sort of organic gold shapes, and there is always some kind of natural gem that is in it or hanging off of it. Anyway, I'm going to encourage you to have a look because it was, I got a little lost in there because it was really stellar.
Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah.
It's frippery.
What is it?
Frippery. It's like something unnecessary, something that nobody needs, but perfect nonetheless, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what you called it, or at least was on the website, it was called rough cut glamour, and I just loved it. So with that introduction, we're just charging off into questions here. So I'm going to ask each of you, and I can start with Allison because she's at the top of my screen, is what is the first question one should answer when planning a kitchen? And Allison, yours is on the screen right this moment.
Well, I think that the first thing that you would answer is like, are you going to cook in this or are you going to just drink in this? Because I do
I've done a
think
lot of that here.
Those are two different designs. So I think that we really take into consideration like the family that lives there and like what is happening here. Like, is this like a rambunctious family of 6 that love to like make pancakes on the griddle on Sunday mornings together? Like, that's a 60-inch range, no question, versus a 36. So, you know, there are lots of things that as you get to know, like, who is the chef? Is it the 16-year-old high schooler? Is it the mom? Is it the dad? You know, like, how are we going to live in this space? And, or like this, are we just really going to enjoy looking at the space?
yeah, this is a
although
look at
totally
kitchen.
functional, this kitchen is, it's like a part of a much larger open penthouse in Pacific Heights. So you have to take that into consideration too. Like, it's not just for the utility, it has to be beautiful too.
So Ryan, what are you going to tell me?
I am obsessed with your bar stools in here, and that hood is insane.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what were you asking?
So the question is, you know, what is the first question you're going to ask your client when you're designing a kitchen?
Oh, I always ask, are you a cook? Are you actually going to cook in there? Or are you just going to have it be a little showpiece and you just want it to always look pretty? That would help us in the selection of the countertops and such. I always ask if they plan on dining formally or casually, whether they want to have a counter table, whether they want a breakfast room. Really the same things you were saying, Allison, about how their lifestyles are and how busy they are and what they're going to do. And are they entertainers? Are they smaller? Do they have a lot of kids, a bunch of family members? Do they have visitors? As much info as they can get before we actually start getting into the conceptual design phase.
Beautiful. So Catherine, the entertainer of all time, the souffle maker and the aga person. What do you?
I think I don't really know people that don't cook. So, and I don't think people that hire me are not hiring me just to set a stage. So I think they come to me because they know I know how to entertain, I enjoy it. And I also I think the kitchen is such an important piece of real estate that, as you can see in the photograph right here, this is a house in Notting Hill. It's a double wide, it's wide this way. So it's rather like being in a country house. I spent 2 weeks here. And it's the dining room, and it's the kitchen. So I think today we do eat in our kitchen a lot. I also think, unfortunately, we haven't got the reverse shot of this room, but there's a great Calder over the fireplace, you know, and quite often your best piece of art belongs in the kitchen. I always say to people, they go, oh, that belongs in the living room. I said, listen, it belongs where it fits. It belongs where it looks best. And as you can see, there it is. There's the other end of that kitchen. And, you know, it's every day. This is my best girlfriend's house, and she's got 3 boys, so rather like me. She's always whipping up something at the stove. So I think the people that I work with are people that understand about cooking and entertaining and eating. And as you can see from this, if you flip back to the other image, you know, there aren't any built-ins apart from the long piece at the back where we've got a farmhouse sink, and then next to it, a few down, is I think it's probably a Viking. The smeg, it's not actually a smeg, it's another make. The fridge is at the other end. But I like to try and treat kitchens as rooms, and I think we may have a shot of my farmhouse in France here, which I've got the same thing going on. That's actually in Santa Monica. That's my house. I have a 2-bedroom house with 2 kitchens. Well, the main house has 2 bedrooms, and then I've got various buildings at the back. But this is the reason I bought this house. Was I've got this wonderful building designed by Koenig Eisenberg, who is a contemporary Frank Gehry's. So this is one end of it, and it's got my sort of slightly formal English furniture, which came from another house. And there again, actually, if I told you all this, we built this kitchen in a day. I basically put the Aga, put the fridge, I put everything down, and my brother came in, built the boxes, and then we poured some concrete. So this was me. You know how the cobbler.
That is a typical Catherine.
It is typical because I didn't know. You know, listen, organized designers, which all of the rest of you are. You know, you get your cabinets done in advance, and you've got Barbara and Waterworth. Actually, I must say, if it wasn't for Laurent in West Hollywood, I don't think anyone would have a kitchen or a bathroom. But I don't know, this room, it feels like in my kitchen in the south of France. And you know what? It's a room. It's a room where we all eat, and it's got this extraordinary dining room table, which is actually, it's worth as much as most people's art is on their wall. But I don't know, it
seems to work. Well, the interesting thing is that you have all these open shelves. So I am positively crazy neat. And I don't know how I would manage open shelves. I know you all know Stephen Gambrell, and he does them really well.
Yeah.
Alice, what do you think about open shelves?
Sorry, who are you asking me?
Oh, I asked Allison.
Oh, Allison.
Oh, sorry.
Allison, wake up.
I love open shelves. I think that like it's very California. It's very casual. I think, but to your point, there are definitely people who do not want to see it. And not only that, you get into kind of like a critical, like thinking area of like, it's going to get dusty. You know, I don't want to have to clean glassware, 1,000 times before I pull them off of the shelf. So I think that, there's definitely like a person or place for it. I think we definitely tend to use open shelves in pool houses, in beach houses, a lot more casual in nature. I think, but I love incorporating them into kitchens where you are using upper cabinets, simply because they give a really great kind of visual texture and layer.
You can do a lot of styling. I mean, believe me, I'm constantly styling. But also here's another one. This is a kitchen I did for a little guest house on the beach in Deauville. And, we've got another big kitchen, but this was just a very, very, very simple for the guests. And you know what? You've got all you're going to need in that house, and you wash them. Everything, it's about washing. You're not going to put things on shelves that are going to sit there and just get very dirty. I put things on shelves that constantly have to be used and washed and put back.
I had been thinking about open shelves myself, and then I figured I'd need to have a live-in stylist to keep it all.
Oh, Barbara, I'm sure you're incredibly good.
In the meantime, everything's behind closed doors. Goodbye and good luck. So you do much more sort of robust and modern things, Ryan. So
yeah,
I can just see that you seem to have things behind closed doors. Would you ever do open shelves, and would you recommend them?
Well, the majority of my clients are families.
I thought that was my dog. I was saying, take the dog.
I'm so sorry. Let me just make sure.
Oh my God, she's hilarious. My own house, it's all open shelves, but that's also because I don't cook and I'm not always using my dishes. So I've got it all styled to the T with cutting boards, like some vases and everything like that. But the majority of my clients are legitimately using their kitchens every single day, 3 times a day. So they do not really like the open shelving. But ever since Pinterest and Instagram, and everybody is constantly looking at kitchens and the way they've been styled, I've been getting requests for more stylish little moments. So we've been adding open shelves in areas like just beside the sink or right in the breakfast area, spaces that they'll use more for styling and not everyday use.
Mm-hmm.
I am in LA, so like you said, Allison, it's a very California thing. It's very casual. So it does come up recently a lot more. And I really think it's because of social and Pinterest, all of that.
Yeah, it was interesting. I thought that there was, in fact, a photograph in this reel somewhere of a kitchen that Stephen Gambrell did. And I mean, you just love every minute of it. But I'm like, oh my God, how do you manage all of that? Anyway, Allison, tell us what the hardest part of designing a kitchen really is.
Oh, the hardest part of designing a kitchen. I hate to say this, but I kind of don't think that it's hard. It's kind of like once you do a couple of them and to Catherine's point, if you entertain regularly and you use a kitchen, which I do and I always have, it's very easy to, know where things should naturally go. And someone asked me this before, and I had said, we think about like storage in terms of what are you using to cook on heat versus what are you using to cook in heat? And then we kind of like divide and conquer that way so that like everything just makes a rational sense in terms of like, what are you reaching for? What do you need? Like the thing is on fire on the stove, like it should be right there, the thing that you need. We hosted a big fundraiser at our house, which had, we had a caterer and a chef in here. And I got the best compliment because he was like, everything was exactly where I wanted it to be. And I was like, yes, we did it. Because truly, like, that's what you need to be thinking about. And then everything else is kind of, a derivative of what's the program of the client. Like, are they classic? Are they modern? Are they preppy? Are they somewhere in between? And then that's kind of the fun stuff. Are you using metal mesh and stone and, fun colors in the lanterns, or are you keeping everything super neutral and very clean and modern? Like, I think those are the really fun things. I think for the technical, difficulty is paneling details. When you're concealing everything in a kitchen down to, the ice maker and the refrigerator, and you're doing complicated toe kicks and decorative elements, keeping your cabinetry, your millwork design consistent. So you honestly cannot tell the difference between a regular, cabinet door versus a dishwasher. Those are what I seriously geek out about, because if you're going to panel your refrigerator and your dishwasher and go that route, then do it, do it so that everything is in line, everything makes sense, and everything is totally tight. And those are the things that I think that, I earn my pay to do, because otherwise, there's so many things available on the market today. Go get yourself a panel dishwasher. Great, paint it.
Allison, do any of your clients still ask for stainless?
Not really. And we've been seeing so much of this cool, the Smeg and Big Chill. It's almost as if you want to see the refrigerator, then it better be something amazing, or something just, turquoise blue and, something worth note. Otherwise, it's put it away. Nobody wants to see it.
Well, I take your points very seriously about thinking about prior to installation, where are things going to go? Because this kitchen that I am in my house, simply got done. And I was busy traveling and not paying attention. And truthfully, there is barely enough room, which is fine. I'm all good about editing, that sort of thing. But there are things that are totally inconvenient. And what I seem to do, and the reason I asked the question, is that instead of having this nice, neat triangle, which people seem to love, I have a racetrack oval. I am running around my island all the time. And
we had a client one time where she was very focused on unloading the dishwasher, and everything needed to be within reach to put away. And so we were just tooling away, trying to get every piece of every day and glassware. And finally I just had this moment where I'm like, you're not supposed to be able to just stand in one place and put your entire dishwasher away. And truthfully, the 5 steps it takes you to get to that cabinet is your Fitbit's telling you good job. Like kitchens aren't necessarily supposed to be like everything is within reach, but it should have like a rational order of things to it, to your point.
So Catherine, so if I said to you, I have just a little splurge money,
Yeah.
where would you spend it?
I'd say invest in an Aga. And I'm not their North American ambassador since they were sold, but I have to tell you, it is such a great piece. It's not for everyone. If you don't like cooking, then it's pointless. But it's just, it's so reminiscent of living in the English countryside. And as I couldn't get my boys to move to the English countryside, I brought it to me, and everyone can cook on it. You can cook your eggs directly onto the hot plate. I don't know. It's a way of life. You can put your Wellington boots in the bottom left. Please, Otis, will you pick up the dog? I'm so sorry.
I'm so surprised it's not my dog, so I'm entirely grateful. Keep barking, dog.
So, I think that a stove, obviously, whether you're a great cook or not, is something that's a fabulous thing. And there you go. Whose picture is that? There's a blue Aga in the back.
Oh, so yes, this is actually Henny van Stockhausen, who is a British designer. And I love this photograph for two reasons. One is I love the wallpaper in the kitchen, which is so unusual.
Me too. Love wallpaper. You see, but there she's treating the kitchen like a living room.
Yeah.
It's not a kitchen. It's a living room. And there she's got, look at the great mixture, that wonderful old English farmhouse table with some Gustavian chairs, and then that dresser and a light fixture. So, and I remember staying with Robert Kime years ago. Robert is my absolute mentor. His house in the English countryside, his kitchen, all he has in his kitchen is an Aga. And then he's got a room, you go off to the side, and that's where it's the washing up room. So now whenever I do build from scratch, or even if I'm just renovating a house, I do a washing up room. I make sure that there is a room off to the side where you take all the plates. And then you know what? You can put them in at night. Buster, please don't just pick them up. I am really get so cross with you. That's what happens. But you could just shove all the plates in that room and wait to do it in the morning. This is a very typically pretty, very English kind of a kitchen. And
yes, it is. It's lovely. So Ryan, some of the kitchens you've designed feature some really bold and really unusual light fixtures. So tell me about that. I mean, look at them. And so tell me what that brings and how you decide on it and where you find them and what that all means.
Well, whenever I'm designing a kitchen, the main design elements are the appliances, the cabinetry, and the countertops. So apart from the styling that you get to do, and with most of my kitchens, because they want it to be fully encased and not open display, the main thing I can do to really add a really bold decorative element is lighting. So I go all out with those. I call them like the jewelry of the room, like the earrings on a girl's face. I love rock crystal. That's the one in this room. And they're cut like live edge little obelisks, kind of small and big, like different sizes wrapped around the ground.
And the light just lives in this metal channel?
Yeah, so it's like an ambient light. It's like an LED, and it illuminates the rock crystal. It's not your primary source of light. You definitely need to have a lot of recessed lighting throughout, which we do. But when it's on, it's so sexy. It's so sexy. It's a really pretty one. And then we have a linear above the island that's a little bit more simplistic so that they don't compete with one another.
So the interesting thing that I have been looking at, and Allison for you, and I know Catherine, you for sure, the dining room in my house has not been used. And I'm trying to think of what I should make it into, because I don't think I'm ever going to use it. Our lives are really informal. They're very casual. And of course, we've been eating outside, which we can no longer do because it's cold. But I mean, I don't know, it looked like you had kind of a nice formal seating area in the kitchen. How are you managing all that? And what are people talking about for dining rooms?
Well, for the last 8 months now, our dining room has been my daughter's school. So, and truthfully, like, you know, it works fantastic for that. And it gives her ample work surface, and she's downstairs and not in her bed. I don't know how many of you can relate to that, but the dining room really is reserved in our house for like holidays. And I do love a formal dining room. Like, I'll never not love a formal dining room for exactly that. You know, like, it makes it special when you use it. But for example, in our kitchen, and in this kitchen in particular, this is a couple and they sit at the corner every night for dinner. But our kitchen has like a harvest table in the middle of it. And where I'm sitting now, we use this every day, at least 3 times a day, if not more, given, you know, snacks and, you know, just sitting around and having coffee and whatnot. So, you know, Catherine's been saying a lot about this idea of the kitchen as the living room. And I absolutely believe that. I think that in a way we've moved away from the great room, which I'm very grateful for. I think that, you know, the kitchen has a purpose and a place, and it doesn't have to be like the 24-hour zone, but I do think kind of making the kitchen softer. Oh yeah, back one is mine. But yeah, here we go. So just making it a little bit more. Sorry?
This is your own house, this one?
This is our kitchen. And one of the things, this kitchen is deceptively not huge. It seems big because it's got a lot of volume, but when we were planning it, the idea of putting a permanent island in the middle just was too cumbersome. It was too much for the space. And it's really worked out to be the best choice to have this table in the middle of the room. And it makes it very cozy and comfortable. And this is where we spend so much time. So.
And I have to say, I'm over island. I'm sitting at one right now, and I seem to do everything at my island. But if I was to do this kitchen again, or I might even rip this island out, I just think having a proper old-fashioned kitchen table, you know, I mean, I work at even though I've got offices here, I'm here, I'm in the kitchen.
Yeah, growing up, we had a kitchen table. And I feel like so much of our design, well, at least my design, is very much informed by my own personal experiences. And, you know, I come from a big family, and you know, all of these things kind of inform how you function in a home. And I think, you know, very fondly back to my childhood and like the kitchen table, so much got done at that kitchen table, you know? So having the momentum kind of tracking back to that and moving more into how do you make these kitchens way more personal and give them more character and less just like these giant blocks of cabinetry, like has really become kind of an extra special way to make it unique to that particular kitchen. So,
well, yeah. I think one of the interesting things is that as I was thinking about writing The Perfect Kitchen, it was really not about how to. I could care less about the how to. That is not mine. This is actually my kitchen. But the idea is that the space is experiential. You want to go in there, you want to feel comfortable, and it's about the things you do together in the kitchen that I personally find really almost more important than anything else. How am I going to use it? How are people going to feel when they hang out either at the island? Sorry, but you can see my kitchen is really tiny. And is there a place at the kitchen table where people can just hang out? So I'm all for that. And the interesting thing was I got all done with a perfect kitchen, sorry. And I looked through and I thought to myself, there is one kitchen in this entire book probably that doesn't have an island. What have we come to, right?
To your point and to all of your points, it's the one room in every single project that, apart from, you know, the basic trends like white's in right now or gray's in right now, it is so dependent on the client and how they live. And one example just to throw out there is like every Friday night, me and my family get together for Shabbat dinner. And right now during COVID, it's always now on the kitchen island because we don't have big Shabbats like we used to. But prior to that, it was all about the formal dining room because the grandparents would come, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. And I had clients from my community who would ask for 14-seater dining rooms. Like it was like you were trying to furnish a dining hall in the South, you know? And now no one cares about it anymore because like you said, all of my clients' kids are working from home and school in the dining room. And now it's all about the kitchen counter, the kitchen breakfast, the banquettes. And it's so different. It's crazy to see. And I wonder if it's ever going to go back or how long it's going to go back.
I don't know. I don't know that I'm ever going back to my office full time. I kind of like working from home.
Oh God, it's great working from home.
Definitely been like a new rhythm established for sure.
Oh,
and it's
God,
not.
I hate it. I want to kill myself. I don't want to work.
You don't like it?
No, I want to go out. I'm an extrovert. I'm not an introvert. I can't stay at home all the time. It's cool for a week, for 2 weeks, but after a few months, it's like, dude, I need to get out of here.
Well, be careful. Seriously, be really careful. So, Allison, I do have a question for you. In one of the kitchens that you did, it was really dark and it had black marble. Oh, there you go. It looks like a black marble countertop and dark wood floors and almost dark teal paint. Any secrets in doing this dark kitchen? It's fabulous.
Well, so this is actually a butler's pantry and bar. So this is what I call a compression zone. And it joins the kitchen, which is behind the photographer in this picture, and the living room. And it's a really grand Georgian home in Presidio Heights. And we did a full renovation to it. And the flow of the house had the living room as a very isolated room. It was an orphaned room. So it was one way in, one way out. And when we refigured the architectural plan of the house, we needed to add certain things that weren't included in this house that was built in 1923, like a proper powder room. And like the kitchen was, a 10 by 12 room in the corner of the house. Like there were a lot of things that just didn't make sense anymore. And one of the things that we try to accomplish with our architectural planning is proper flow. This goes back to like, how are we entertaining? How, who wants to be stuck in the far corner of the living room at the Christmas party? Like, how do we make these rooms circulate? And so this actually became this passageway between the kitchen and the living room at the back of the house. And we were able to accommodate this butler's pantry, which in the kitchen, there are no upper cabinets. It's all open and super airy and bright. I don't know if there's a picture in the slide of it, but this is really where they're storing a lot of their pieces. And in the space beyond is like a wine room to the right, and then a bar with a really cool tap in the counter. And so it was like, how do we give this space a little bit of an elevated presence in between these very like bright, open, airy spaces? And I don't know, I love a dark color. It makes it dramatic. Do the ceiling, the walls, the crown, everything.
I love it. My kitchen's black.
It's stunning. It's stunning. Well,
How
Catherine,
can you see anything?
So, Catherine, here's a question for you. I have heard lots of people say they never want to see another white kitchen. What do you say?
You know what? I somewhat agree, but do you know what? Doing a kitchen is, when you're really doing a kitchen, I get so overwhelmed with, there's so much going on that I always start off, I go, just let's paint it sort of white, and then if you want to change it later, let's do it. I don't know. I always think having an off-white back color as the background, it offsets everything else that's there. And for the most part, kitchens are full of so much stuff. I mean, look at this kitchen of mine. That's my second kitchen. That's not the kitchen I'm sitting in right now. It's just, and by the way, look at that fabulous, talking about having an island. that's a piece actually I bought in the Hamptons years ago. It's just, and I've made it many times over. It's counter height. I don't know what it was used before. Otis, please pick up. Come here.
I will chime in on the white kitchen because I think that there's as mentioned, I love doing a colored kitchen. Primarily, I love doing butler's pantries in very dark, compressed colors. But conversely to Catherine, I really think that even though people say they are bored and sick of the white kitchen, it is one of the most frequently requested things that we are.
I mean, I agree. It may sound boring, but at the end of the day, it's very safe. And look, like in this kitchen, we had the yellow Formica on the table, and we've got the Calder print in the background. So there's still a lot. You couldn't possibly call this a white kitchen, although the background is sort of white. But I think a lot of times, and it's a shame we couldn't have shown hundreds of different slides, but I've done cabinets, I've done yellow cabinets, I've done turquoise cabinets, so I just think it depends how much time people actually spend in a kitchen. If it's your living room as well, obviously you can't keep changing the colors of your cabinets like you can your slip covers. But I don't know, I think that you can never go wrong with white, as dull as it may be.
There are a lot of white kitchens out there, that's for sure. But it's interesting, when putting together a book, it was interesting to look at some of the kitchens. And one of the ones that I loved so much was a kitchen that Tom Shearer did with John Murray, the architect in New York. This kitchen is a bright green lacquer with matching green tile and a cork floor. It was like this amazing envelope, very much, Allison, like the butler's pantry. It was just a skinny New York kitchen, but much like that. So Ryan, talking of pantries, are you into that sort of thing? Do you like them? Are they pantries? Are they laundries? Are they just storage units? What are they?
Oh, they're butler's pantries, but I don't know why I never photographed them. And recently, these projects are still under construction, so I don't have any images to show. A lot of the pantries are now turning into second kitchens. And my clients are requesting a smaller kitchen where they actually do all of their cooking and they have their microwave and they have all of their, ugly stuff. And then the main kitchen is always on display, and it always looks like that editorially published kitchen that you want it to always feel like. So we're in LA, so there's a lot more land and more massive homes, so they could do that. I don't know if it would be something that would be as easy like on the East Coast or in San Francisco, but a lot of people here and a lot of my clients are building secondary kitchens instead of pantries, or butler's pantries, may I say.
I mean, I understand the need for that. I mean, there are times there is a little bar, which of course we don't use. I mean, we drink out on the patio and we drink wine and we're not mixing drinks. And I keep thinking that there must be another use for this bar, which has counters and sinks and all of that. But I have seen lots more opportunity for these specialty rooms.
I think it's going to get bigger and bigger, honestly. I think more people are going to request like a small chef's kitchen and then make their big kitchen their entertainer's kitchen.
Yeah, I think that's what people do. As I said, both my houses, I've got two kitchens. One is where you have someone cooking and the mess and the kind of the guts of the kitchen. And then you've got the sort of great room, kitchen, dining combination, family type room. It's a shame you don't see this. As I said, it's the guest house to the main house, which I just finished. But the other end, it's another sort of big living room with a big table. But I think that that's it. And actually, even in this tiny room, you go through the door there, and I've got a sort of pantry with a second sink in it. I just think it's the idea of smelling up a room of food if you're really cooking. that there's something about it. I know it sounds extremely spoiled to have two kitchens, but it's very practical if you really do cook.
That's my next one.
Yeah, we've been asked with the catering kitchen. But again, these are like in the architectural programming component of our projects, where this is a family that does a lot of formal entertaining on a large scale, whether it's for corporation or for whatever reason. And the catering kitchen actually becomes a part of the actual architectural program. And we think about, like, how does the catering team enter? How do they leave? What's their flow through the house from that kitchen? So it becomes less of the, like, I'm going to keep my spindrifts and my, pretzels in this kitchen, and this is going to be, and it really becomes a part of, like, the thinking in terms of access to the patio, access to the landscape. And then once the event is complete, how do they exit the property without anyone even noticing? And so the catering kitchen is definitely something that we see as a request in terms of, like, very, like, high scale programming in terms of kitchen needs.
Interesting.
Butler's pantries are just fun. That's where you keep your silver and your depression glass and, like, have a martini and, fun.
So I have some childhood memories of my grandmother's kitchen. And it didn't have an island, that is for sure. It had a table, a big table in the middle. And we, of course, this is 100 years ago, 105 actually. But we were a community of women who used to cook for holidays. I had two female cousins and one aunt, and my mother and my grandmother. And so those memories are kind of special, and they influence a little bit of the thinking around a kitchen. So do any of you have any really amazing experiential thoughts about kitchens that you had as a child?
Oh, hot toddies at Christmas time. My mom always made hot toddies on Christmas Eve. And so it's like the aroma. So we think about, like, what are the fragrances and the smell, like, what is the experience?
What is a hot toddy? That's whiskey.
Yeah, yes, and it smells so good. And there's this, like, glass, like, that goes on the stove, and that. But my parents also had a glass of wine every night at the kitchen counter, and it did not matter during that cocktail hour of theirs, like, whatever they were drinking, whether it was wine or a martini, like, we could literally be on fire in the background, my siblings and I. It did not matter. That was, like, their sacred time. And I always think about that, like, when I'm, designing a kitchen. It's like, who is, like,
well, I think that, I have those memories. I think, we lived in a very drafty house on the west coast of Scotland. And literally, if you opened the front door and the back door was open, you could get swallowed up like in a vortex, but you could be taken out the back of the house. And I do remember every time that happened, literally my mother's glass of wine I could see going to one side. But yeah, but we lived very simple even back then. It was very simple. God, I think about our kitchen and the drafts. We used to have to run. It was so cold. We used to have to run from our bedroom to the bathtub. You'd have to get the courage. I don't know why it was so cold. It just was. It was just we were on the sea. And Christmases they were particularly cold. But I suppose that, that's why I'm quite as feisty as I am now. All those very...
Oh, yes, my God.
And also we ran out of hot water. It wasn't like we had tons of hot water, but still, our house was the house that all my friends wanted to come to, because hot water, sleeping, blankets, hot water bottles, no one really cared. We had the fun house.
Okay, Ryan, do you have some wonderful thing you'd like to share?
Oh, well, for us, it was every Hanukkah, we would be in the kitchen cooking latkes with my grandma. Passover, it was all the high holidays. We would get together in the kitchen to make seders and things like that. During the week, my mom would get really lazy, and she would always, at least once a week, go get a fully cooked rotisserie chicken from the grocery store. pretend she cooked it to make my dad happy and pour him his wine. And she would get away with it. But then it was the high holidays where cooking would just be everyone would come. They would bake challah, they would make huge dishes. And it's funny because I'm Iranian, but I'm also Jewish. So it was a mix of this very Jewish Ashkenazi type dishes and like Persian, Middle Eastern rices and stews. So grew up with a lot of.
Smell it. It smells great. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me this afternoon, and LCDQ for pulling themselves together to do this really interesting virtual LCDQ. It's been really wonderful. Thank you, Allison and Ryan and Catherine. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Next time in person. And Barbara,
Yes.
it's about time you got to France next summer. I'm going to be there. All
I'm
summer.
on my way. I'm going to buy my ticket tomorrow.
Catherine, I'm coming too.
Please, all of you, and Alison, come as well. I'm planning a wedding. My middle son Otis is getting married.
Wow.
Amazing.
No, but
Congratulations.
Otis has got a great textile collection, but yeah, you're all welcome to come.
Oh, yay. We'll be there. Not to worry.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you all.